Hello, everyone. This is Anthony, your host, and welcome to Pathways to Zero Barriers, the podcast where we explore what it takes to scale disability-inclusive innovations across the globe. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Ali Shabbar, CEO of DeafTawk, which is a social enterprise delivering real-time sign language interpretation through human and AI-powered services. DeafTawk has become a leading voice in digital accessibility. And what I absolutely admire most is how they're not just building tech solutions for the sake of building technology, but they're shifting entire narratives around communication and inclusion for the deaf community. Ali, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for inviting us.
Amazing. Super excited. We're also joined by Walter Tsui, advisor to DeafTawk and founder of CareER in Hong Kong. Walter brings years of experience working across accessibility, inclusive employment, and disability leadership. What makes his experience so valuable is that it's deeply rooted in the lived experiences of persons with disabilities, and it's also combined with ecosystem building. And we're so glad to have him with us today. Walter, thank you for joining us.
Sure, I'm very glad to be here today, so thank you for having me.
Pathways to Zero Barriers, scaling solutions for disability inclusion. What does it take to lead as a founder with a disability? Not just at launch, but as your team scales and your product evolves. Hear about finding a leadership style, shifting from grand entrepreneur to a revenue mindset, and why you should love the problem you're solving.
Ali, can you walk us through one of DeafTawk's most defining moments when it comes to international expansion?
Yes, indeed. I still remember it was back in 2020 when most of the world was shut down because of a pandemic. It was COVID times, and businesses were thinking to cut off their operational costs, layoffs, shutting down the expansions. And that was a time when we believed it's the best time for the growth because of digital communication. Because everything turning into digital technologies, every meeting, every concept and it was turning as a new norm for them. And for that, in 2020, we got humongous requests from Singapore to provide sign language interpretation services because we are having a conferences, we having a digital webinars, we are having stuff. So from there, we start providing the digital sign language interpretation services in the different conferences where deaf people were participating through definitely Zoom and different digital platforms. And from there, we found a partner who said, you guys are doing an amazing work. Why don't you come to Singapore and scale your product over here? And we thought it's COVID. How we can go there as that time? So then there was a soft landing program through Enterprise Singapore and SG Enable. They both help us, and then we start scaling. And that was the first time when we moved out of Pakistan to another country.
That's so brilliant. And I love that while everyone else in the globe was kind of shutting down and, closing up, you were sitting there going, no, we can launch a new business. We can make the lives better for people around the world. Absolutely brilliant work. I'm wondering if there was any kind of learnings that you had along the way, maybe something that went, not quite to expectations, something surprising that happened that gave you a chance to learn.
A lot of surprises because if we talk about the cultural context, it's entire different paradigm shift from Pakistani culture to the Singaporean culture. The unit economics entirely changed because in Pakistan, when we are giving a quote for a sign language interpretation services for 10 minutes of services or maximum 60 minutes of services, it's just you can easily earn over there on 1 minute. So that's the change in the unit of economics. the third very, very important is the regulation element. Because when we are going towards the countries, or more importantly, where has more policy and legal binding there, so there is a question on the compliance element, how accurate your sign language interpreters are, what is your authority over it if somebody do certain data leakages or privacy element. So that's again because in Pakistan we don't have that call, so we have to develop those systems, those portfolios when we are launching. Yes, initially we got a lot of challenges, but on the way of those challenges we able to build off those services and able to be replicate our part as a cookie cutter for Singapore market.
That's just so interesting because we've had law and policy and regulations come up in previous episodes, and you're seeing it not just as a limitation, but as an opportunity to learn and to improve your services in a big way. So I just think that's really, really admirable. I have so much respect for the work that you're doing here. I want to get Walter's take on some of these issues. Walter, in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that organizations face when they're trying to transfer accessibility services across borders?
So I think, first of all, I think the one thing is the team commitments and then the stability of the team. Because actually I realize we need to have a strong team. One is the external facing, and then one need to focus on internal facing when we are expanding outside of one countries to another countries. Because actually there are a lot of, for example, you got to have somebody watch your back in operating the products and services. At the same time, you need to spend enough time outside of your original countries to meet with different people in that new market, understanding the business model would fit to the new places as well. But then actually you need to be away from your, I would say, is like the home countries or actually where your business originally based. And that's super important that somebody who can be able to run the system well and then maintain the business in your original business model. At the same time, you don't need to worry about the back and then going fast in your explorations. And then, for example, I think you need to talk to the local key opinion leaders. And then across different regions, or you also need to watch out for example, the legal perspective on how to define people with disabilities, and then who would pay for it, and then who would be the beneficiaries. And then it's usually would shift your business model. Who are going to pay for it? Are they going to being the beneficiaries of the products? Or sometimes it's in different group of people, but that's could be different across different countries and region as well. So I think first of all, you need to have a low turnover rate of your own team. So actually, because me myself, when we are exploring about going outside of Hong Kong, and then one of the hurdles is when we experience a big turnover, and then you need to watch your original business, and then you might not be able to have a full speed to explore about the expansion. And then also the other things is the cultural differences of, for example, one places or one culture would perceive disability differently. For example, in Asia, it's one of the unique things is a lot of the countries have different definition for people with disabilities. And then also, just like the blind people and deaf people, and then the language is different. And then how people perceive that the right language also different as well. So I think that is the very important things that we need to watch out to. And then I always say that to Ali is I also admire the team that Ali is having is because actually Ali's team have very clear job and task differentiation. Ali's is always like the external facing, and then I know Ali's also have a wonderful teams watching for example, the product developments, the codings and programming parts, and then also having a very clear and stable teams watching the back so that Alis could be able to run in full speed in different places and go into good competitions as well. So the third thing that I would also look into is the setup of the organization, because when we explore about cross countries expansion, we also need to watch out for example, the original setup. For example, is limited by share or limited by guarantee, and what is the legal entities that you are having in your home country is also facilitated the longer term developments. Versus, like, for example, limited by guarantee probably would hinder your cross countries developments and expansion, versus like limited by shares could be able to have a stronger flexibilities for regional expansions and cross continents expansion as well.
Walter, that was absolute gold. If you're listening to this podcast right now, I think you need to rewind 5 minutes, listen to every word that Walter said, and when you finish it, go back 5 minutes again and listen to it again. Because everything you said was not only kind of hitting some of the real key issues that we talked about on the podcast before, but you drew out so many new concepts and ideas that I hadn't even considered in my 15 years of experience in this field. So I just want to go back through some of these things, because you started off by differentiating the external facing and internal facing teams in an organization. And I think that's such a useful way of approaching this and thinking about how you're going to structure your expansion. And then to sit there and say, okay, we can't just consider law and policy in terms of requirements. We also got to consider things like how they define persons with disabilities and who pays, who's benefiting in this work. So this lead into your company might have to pivot your business model is something I've seen people struggle with, founders really struggle with. And so the fact that you're putting this out there right now to say, hey, you need to be aware of this before you even go into another country is brilliant. And then the last piece that really jumped out at me is the low turnover. And I think this is something where leadership matters so much, because if your company has people coming in and out, you got to look at what are the leaders doing, because they're the ones who are responsible for keeping your team around, for making sure that folks are happy and they're feeling connected to the work. And if you have high turnover, oh my gosh, that can kill a company as soon as anything. Walter, I need more of your awesomeness here. Tell me, are there common patterns that you've observed across the organizations that you've been working with?
So I think, especially for myself and Ali, is a founder with disabilities ourselves. I think one thing is, first of all, a person with disability have found our business. Usually, it's easy to get attract like heroism, that people would find, wow, awesome, like person with disabilities could be able to found an organization. Usually, it was started with a lot of spotlight. But that is the internal emotion. You will feel so good about this. But sometimes after a while, you realize actually you don't have enough time to actually doing something practically on your business. And then you're just going to different places to like catch up with the media coverage, and then the press is going to chase you for interviews. And then I think the first pattern is like we need to balance between a founder is going external as a external image of your organization to attract like investors and press in the public relations part, but you balance the times that you need to do actual work. I think that's the first thing. And then the other things is we also explore about the leadership development for ourselves in the not the founding stage, but the team development and leadership development stage. And then we realize a lot of leaders with disabilities also would hit into a place that we don't have much role models and don't have much management book to define what means by a person who are, for example, who are hearing impaired, what it means by active listening for hearing impaired people, and then what means by, for example, when we understand a lot of communications is not just by verbal, a lot of the communications is depending on gesture, the tones, and the facial expressions, and so on. When coming into when we grow the team and the business. We need to develop our teams and then how they develop their own skills or of our subordinates. But there are not much reference like for visually impaired, how to look at people's gesture. We need to be very authentic, that we need to admit that we couldn't see, couldn't hear, for those who might not know about our leadership style. I think this pattern is happening all the time for leaders with disabilities. Once we admit and recognize that kind of style, sometimes we don't recognize. And then people would assume that we can see, we can hear, because actually their previous jobs for 20 years before they come into my team, and then they would assume that we can see and hear and those kind of little things. So I think that's two patterns we talk about that quite deeply when we have the advisory and then mutual exchange with Ali and myself, meeting face to face and also meeting virtually as well. We talk about that all the time.
This is so cool because I never even thought about like this idea of active listening, for example, and folks in the hearing impaired community. You know, I'm lucky enough to work as a motivational speaker, and I do a lot of speaking on leadership and especially on active listening. And it never even occurred to me that this is a barrier that folks who have disabilities might face in their leadership. And what you're pointing out as well with someone who might be blind or visually impaired. I'm wondering if we can go a little bit deeper into this, and where do you see solutions like the ones that you've already developed with Ali kind of taking shape? And what I'm thinking here is, do we need a separate kind of training support for leaders with disabilities, or do we just need like leadership trainers who are aware of these issues that can kind of address these in a training kind of setting?
So for me is my suggestions, and also I talked to a lot of like impact investing guys, and then we also have a very clear observation is for a successful business, we usually have a very strong like external like business development person, regardless of the person is with or without disability. But one successful thing is usually we have an unsound hero behind us to develop the team. They have a strong like organizational development person, and then we work side by side with strong amount or high level of trust between each other, and then we could be able to have that person have a strong feedback, frequent feedback to the leaders on doing the business development, to run through the operation or translate what is that this expansion to a certain countries means to our current structure, and then pivot the structure to align with the business development part, and then make it as a agility, maintain the agility. To actually fit the expansion across countries. So, and then I think another thing is we touched through, for example, with Ali and also my business about like when we having cross countries managements, and then we need to also look at our finance, like in terms of the current economic structure. We realize like even those like foreign exchange, the price and values going up high and like reduce, and it could be like 10% up and downs within 3 months. And then you can look at like how much British pounds inflated for the last three months to 6 months. Is crazy. So we need to have somebody who actually manage that, and then to put that risk factor into the business operation as well. So we in the seed money or like angel funds or venture capitals, we always like look at how strong and how vocal is the leadership going into attracting like the lead investor. But actually we always talk about like how people watch our back on organizational developments, and then watch out for the financial risk as well.
Walter, you just have so much wisdom, and I feel like you and I could probably have a conversation about these issues all day long. But I want to start wrapping up here, and I want to hear from Ali again. Ali, when you're looking back on the journey that you've been with DeafTawk, is there a particular kind of lesson that you had to learn the hard way that helps you shape your approach in when it comes to new projects or even regions that you're growing into?
Indeed, yes, because when we talk about our journeys, it's a very roller coaster one. And every new day is a new learning because we primarily, when we started DeafTawk, we were not entrepreneurs. We believe ourselves to be a good employees because before that, like around 10 years, we were doing jobs in different corporate sectors. And we believe like we can be very good employees rather than be a good entrepreneurs. So that's one paradigm shift when we started DeafTalk. It brings a lot of other aspects where we need to improve ourselves as well. Particularly as Walter described the leadership element, because if we talk about founders with disabilities, most of them are very good in speaking. Most of them are very good in describing the disability rights. But when you are taking on an organization as a leader, as a CEO, as a founder, that leadership capacities has to be evolved. How to manage the teams, how to manage the complexities or complex decision making, how quickly you need to adapt with the investors or the debt negotiation. That when the term sheet comes, it's just an example. When we receive our first term sheet, we think, "Oh, we did it everything. Now we have a money," but that was just a point, and we forgot how to bargain or negotiate on the term sheet. So that's small little things. But yeah, if you take 2-3 quick learnings, which we always say or reflect like it should be. One is that don't love your product. Love the problem you are solving because product will evolve eventually. It's an example when we were scaling to Singapore or then Sri Lanka, we were so much possessive of our product. Oh, we made this. Why we need to change it now? But definitely when you are scaling, the cultural context change, user demands changes, user empathy changes, and you have to evolve with respect to it. And when you are talking about technology product, it has to be always evolving. Otherwise, you will be Nokia or Kodak. So that's one learn we got. The second learning is like investments or these are always be a byproduct. The main goal should be how to generate the revenue. If you are not generating a revenue and if your business pipeline is not being properly defined, as Walter said, who is your ideal customers? Either persons with disabilities or the someone else who is paying behalf of persons with disabilities. So it's very, very important. So generating revenue, because initially when we were scaling, we were providing free services. And over that we have huge burn rate. So whatever we are earning, we are just expending on the burn rate. And that unit economics is no use. And when we went for pitching to the investors, they said, you have a huge burn rate. What's the evaluation of your company then? So that's the second element, like start generating the revenue. How possible or could be possible, like it has to be a revenue generated activity. As a founder, I like my only job now after establishing is finding the good people for DeafTalk. How I can engage those people who help us to scale globally, who help us to take our mission forward and empower the deaf community and to be the Google translator for the deaf community across the globe. So finding the good people is again something which we learned during the course of the scaling process.
Ali, I want to draw out some of these things about generating revenue because having worked with dozens and dozens of disability innovations across the world, one of the things I've seen time and time again is a company that has got their start with government grants or maybe a small investment, but isn't necessarily generating revenue. They're doing good work. They're doing important work. They're doing work that affects people's lives, but they're not generating revenue per se. What advice could you give them to kind of get out of the mindset that all they need to do is apply for the next government grant and into the mindset of, okay, I need to target a market. I need to target a specific customer group. who are my ideal customers?
Yeah, definitely. Because when we were started, we were the same. And we've been tagged as grant-entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs. And then it was a hard learning element, and we learn it through as well. Like generating revenue is critically important. And for that, it's always define the beachhead customers who will pay you. Simple. And why will they pay you? So in that two questions, you can easily get your solution right and revenue generation or profitability generation right. Like if B2B clients are ready to pay and happy to pay, but why they want to pay? Because they want to make their services inclusive, because of the compliance processes, and because they can be leveraged or extra value addition for their clients. So in that context, you can easily tap and earn from B2B clients. Same, if B2C or direct users want to pay, why they want to pay? Because in emergency, you will able to provide those services, or in anywhere whenever they want an interpreter, you will provide that interpreter. So for that security, that synergy, that trust level, they will pay. So that's very important to understand why your customer will pay and for what reason they will pay. So, and who are your customers who will pay? So these questions, if you can answer, you will able to start generating the revenue.
Yeah, I love it. This is another time that listeners, rewind the last couple of minutes, listen to what Ali said again. This is such important wisdom. This is such important insights. It can really help transform your approach and really shape your journey in years to come. Walter, I want to give you kind of the last word here. I want to understand a little bit more about any insights or reflections that you could offer an organization who's trying to prepare themselves for their first major international transfer of services.
Yep. So I will just bring it as a very quick advice is find your minimal viable product. So please don't spend too much time on research. And then I know people need to have basic, but we can always without having someone on the ground or even those any setup, you can always try something low costs and then just make a leaflet and then try it out the market. Just do it, and then you would know coming from your customer or potential customers' feedback, and then you can always fine tune. So just find your right MVP to go ahead.
Yeah, just taking it straight to figuring out what the market is interested in, that it's engaged in, and being able to test. Absolutely. Excellent way of wrapping this up. I appreciate both of your time. It means so much to me that you would dedicate this to helping others and helping other companies try to bring their disability innovations worldwide. Thank you guys so much and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony.